It's always a joy to be with you, and it's great to have George on with us today as well. One of the things that United in Purpose does is we're kind of an under-the-radar type organization. Not many people know who we are or what we do, but it's pretty exciting when you think about the fact that here's an organization that really was birthed from the vision of a couple of fellows who really felt like that a culture in America was in the decline, and began to try to bring together a team that would impact where we are culturally speaking in America today. And so as a result of that, George Barna today heads up the research division and does a phenomenal job in that area. We have an incredible tech team that's developing all types of technology that such as the voter lookup tool and some other things that are beneficial to various organizations. And then Churches Impacting Culture, which is actually the division that I have the joy of serving as the executive director of. We're out mobilizing pastors and churches and identifying conservative churches and so forth, and working really to take this incredible number of conservative Christian believers in America and get them to stand up and speak up for the things that they have committed themselves to believe. That is the moral commands of Scripture, the things that the Word of God clearly teaches. And so we are today pleased to be with you to have the opportunity to talk about not only the results of some incredible survey work that George and his team has brought to the table today, and then also, in addition to that, we want to talk a little bit about what we're doing for 2016 to mobilize pastors and churches and people to get out and to, in fact, vote their convictions and to be good stewards of their vote.
Let me just mention, those of you listening, get something to write with right now, because I want you to be able to maybe write down a couple of key words, but at the moment, I want you to write down two numbers. One is 90 million. The other number is 39 million. 90 million represent the number of Christians in America. You can probably guess where the next one is. 39 million. That's the number who did not vote in any given election. And that includes not only those people who were not registered to vote, but also those who were registered to vote that did not vote. And one of the reasons I wanted to get you on the program is, Gary, I know you and George and others have talked about this 39 million figure. It shows up a lot of times on Facebooks, and I wanted people to just hear that and think about it for just a minute.
Well, it is astounding that 90 million 18-plus born-again population. In other words, those are 18 years of age and older. That means they're eligible to register and to exercise their stewardship with regard to voting. And yet of that number, only 13 million of them don't bother to register at all. And then, in addition to that, as you mentioned a moment ago, that leaves us, if you take 90 million, take out the 13 million that are not registered at all, we have 77 million self-identified conservative born-again voters who have registered. And of that number, 26 million said, hey, I'm not going to take the time to actually get out and go and vote. And that has brought about an incredible window of opportunity for those who are opposed to the teachings of the Word of God to simply have a heyday, because self-identified Christians are just staying away from the polls. And the conversation that we dealt with in, of course, 2012 rather, was that, I'm not going to vote for a Mormon. It's not about voting for a Mormon or voting for a Muslim or voting for a Christian, whatever you may think of the current president, whether he's a Mormon or Christian. That's not even a conversation I want to have, because my position is very simple. If you were arrested for being a Christian, is there enough evidence to convict you? And I think that's all we need to say with regard to who occupies the White House. But having said that, the left has had an incredible opportunity, because we have simply decided that we're going to be absent when the time comes to cast our vote. We're working diligently to change that, and the research that George has done really gives us great insight into what's happening in the Christian scene that really needs to change, and it needs to change quick. In fact, we have from today's date, we have about 425 or so days before election time in November of 2016. So now is the time to raise the bar of awareness, to engage people, and to inform them so that we can activate them to do what we need to be doing, and that is being salt and light in our culture.
George Barna, let me come to you for just a few minutes because I know you've been doing all sorts of surveys, and one of those had to do with some of the key issues which you asked if these were very important for individuals to hear about. Because one of the things that Gary Frazier and I talked about, matter of fact, last time you were in the studio, is that there was a piece that came out a while back saying that many pastors aren't teaching on the issues that people sitting in the congregation really want to hear. So what did you find out?
Well, very simply, what we discovered is that, in the first place, most people who are conservative or moderate, leaning toward conservative views, kind of people who attend churches regularly, are Christians. These are individuals who are saying, you know what, my church was not really involved in the election in the past 2 cycles. And what we found is that about 2/3 of them said, I want them to be more involved in the future. We asked them, well, what about simple things like giving you information about the candidates or the issues or the election itself? And once again, we found most people said, no, my church didn't even do that.
Wow.
And again, about 2/3 were saying, yeah, I really want them to ramp it up and to give us more information. And so then we wanted to conduct more research to find out, well, what kinds of things do you want to know about?
And let me just take a break, and when we come back, let's look at that list. And again, I'm going to encourage some of you listening to take some notes because it wouldn't surprise you. Many of the issues we talk about every single day here on Point of View, or even on our Friday weekend edition on religious liberty, those are some of the issues. But I think we are finding from some of this research that many of you, not just in the listening audience, but others sitting in church saying, I really want my pastor to address these issues, but my pastor is not. I would really like to be equipped to be a good citizen, and there's some disconnect. So we're going to continue talking about that. Gary Frazier in studio, George Barna with us by phone. We'll be back right after these important messages.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Doubt is something that we all face, and all of us have doubts, but these shouldn't lead to confusion, hopelessness, and unbelief. Doubts can often deepen our dependence on God and give us empathy for others. Pastor Bobby Conway was on my radio program recently to talk about his new book, Doubting Towards Faith, The Journey to Confident Christianity. Sean McDowell wrote the foreword to the book, and he was also on my radio program recently and talked about doubt. Bobby Conway reminds us that there are different forms of doubt: emotional doubt, intellectual doubt, volitional doubt, and evidential doubt. He also has 2 chapters on the doubt triggers in our world today. These range from questions about alleged contradictions in the Bible to moral and ethical questions found in the Bible. And he reminds us that Jesus can handle our doubts. After all, Thomas had questions and doubts. Jesus did not condemn him, but answered his questions and provided evidence for his doubts. In the foreword and his radio interview with me, Sean McDowell shared how doubts first hit him as a college student. He sat down with his father to share his doubts. Josh McDowell responded, I think it's great that you want to find truth. This actually gave Sean room to pursue his questions and resolve his doubts. It allowed him to make the faith of his parents his own faith. He discovered that doubts don't have to be the end of faith. They can often be the impetus for the development of a deeper, more genuine faith. And of course, you have to be intentional in your search for truth. So I would say that if you have doubts or know someone who has doubts, this is an excellent book to read and pass on to others. It is well written and immensely practical. And as some of us have said, we wish we had this book when we were growing up and asking good questions that few, if any, seemed to be able to answer. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Prayer is a powerful weapon. From Provident Films and Affirm Films comes War Room, now playing rated PG. More information at warroomthemovie.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Today we're talking about the Christian vote and also what we need to do inside our churches to equip individuals to be good citizens. We're certainly citizens in heaven, but we're also citizens in earth. And in Romans 13, 1-7, we are to obey those in authority, but I think we also are basically in our situation commanded, if you want to, vote for those in authority, because those who have political responsibility will be responsible before God. And how have we done in terms of actually taking that stewardship responsibility? Have we buried our talents? I think the answer is pretty obvious. Let me come back. Gary Frazier in studio, George Barna by phone. George, for just a few minutes, talk about some of the issues. You talked about, obviously, that there was a desire on the part that you found on many individuals that wanted to get better equipped by their church so that they would be able to vote intelligently. What were some of the key issues that were most important to some of the people that responded to your polls?
Yeah, and Kerby, this is a survey of almost 3,000 people that we conducted. What we found was there were 6 issues where 80% or more agreed that these were very important issues for them to hear about from the pulpit. And it's not that they want to know what their pastor thinks. What they were saying was that they want to hear their pastor tell them what the Bible teaches on these issues. And there are important reasons for that we'll talk about later. But number 1 on the list was abortion, where we found 91% said it was either extremely or very important that they hear about that from the pulpit, what the Bible teaches on that. The second issue had to do with religious freedom and religious persecution, a number of things related to that. 86% said they needed to hear about that. Poverty came in third on the list at 85%. Right behind that, cultural restoration, talking about things like appropriate morals and law and order, defensible values and norms, even the issue of self-government. 83% of these individuals in the survey said they wanted to hear about that from their church. Issues related to sexual identity, such as same-sex marriage, sexual identity, transgenderism, marriage, all of these types of things. 82% said they want to know what the Bible teaches. And the whole issue about Israel, what is its role in the world, what is the responsibility of a Christian toward Israel and of America toward Israel, all of these kinds of things, 80% said they wanted to hear what the Bible teaches about that. So those were the top 6 of the 22 that we tested.
So again, abortion, religious liberty, poverty, cultural restoration, sexual identity, and Israel. Gary, those are the kind of topics we talk about here almost every day. Certainly in an average couple of weeks or month, every one of those topics get covered in one way. As I look down the further list of some of the others, there are a few others, but it does seem to me that that's what many people are looking for if they're going to cast an intelligent vote. Pastors need to equip themselves and certainly need to equip their congregations with some of these issues, don't you think?
Absolutely. And, as a former pastor, Kerby, I understand that pastors have a lot on their plates on a regular basis. And day by day by day, they are dealing with all of these issues of the breakup of the family and the home. They're struggling with, staff situations. I mean, just all kinds of things that are going on in the life of the average pastor. But one of the things that concerns me greatly, being a minister of the gospel, is that the pulpit is the place where we, men of God who've been called by God, equipped to bring the message of God, we're to preach the whole counsel of the Word of God. And unfortunately today, it seems that we're omitting a huge portion of Scripture, and in the process of that, we are not doing our due diligence in equipping believers to do the work of the ministry. Now, having said that, in fact, we were on a call just a few days ago talking about some of these things, and George actually alludes to this and later on in his survey results, and that is that some pastors, in fact, it could be a good number of pastors, are not teaching these things, not necessarily because they don't want to do it. In some cases, I'm not sure that they're equipped to do it.
Yes, that's what I was
going to one of the things is that many times, obviously, abortion, this is not rocket science. I mean, we understand from the Word of God that religious persecution, these top 6 items are things that really every pastor should be equipped to speak on. Now, the question then becomes, if across the board, we're finding that people want to know these things, and the pastor actually knows these things, then where's the disconnect? Why is it that the pastor is not communicating these things to his congregants? And you have to step back and look at that and look at Christendom overall today and what's happening in the church, on the church scene. And one of the things that George himself wrote about and did some survey work back not too awful long ago, a couple of years ago. And George, you correct me if I say something wrong here, but if my memory serves me correct, there were about 1,078 self-identified conservative pastors whom George and his organization surveyed, and they found out that when the question was asked, do you believe the Bible addresses the social issues of our day, that some 90% said they believe that. But then when the question was posed, then if you believe that, do you teach your people what the Bible says about the social and moral issues of our day? And only 10% said they did.
Whoa.
George, could you enlighten us a little bit on that and add some of your personal thoughts to that? Because that seems to be, this real apparent gulf, if you please, of major disconnect between the pulpit and the pew.
Yeah, it wasn't quite the way it worked out in the survey, but I mean, what we found out was that there were only 3 issues for which more than 10% of pastors had actually preached on those issues, and those were same-sex marriage, abortion, and American-Israel relations. But many of the other issues that are on this list that we just did the research on, and of course they're in public conversation daily because of the campaign, things like immigration, only 8% of theologically conservative Protestant pastors across the country have preached on immigration in the past 2 years. Only 9% have preached on financial issues such as taxes and financial reform, government debt. Only 10% have preached on privacy issues. Only 1 out of every 8 has talked about things like gun rights, gun ownership, those types of issues, which are real stuff, the real stuff that people are struggling with. So there is a disconnect, and what we're finding is that there are a number of different reasons why pastors won't address these issues or haven't addressed these issues. And some of the key ones include, first of all, fear that the IRS is going to revoke the church's nonprofit status if they address these things, and of course that won't happen. The fear that it will cause too much controversy and therefore numbers will decline, and of course most pastors are gauged in terms of their success based on the numbers in the church. And then a third issue that we found is that so many of them simply don't know what the Bible teaches on these issues. So even if they didn't have fear of the IRS, even if they were worried about losing people in the congregation, they still don't know where to start. They aren't taught this in seminary. Their denominations don't help them with it. There's not many resources or places they can turn to get the kind of training and background information that they need to do a thorough study of this so that they can teach adequately on the topics.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to take some phone calls, but also talk about maybe some other reasons why pastors are not addressing those issues. One of those, of course, could be, what about, I just preached the gospel and got a guy that believes in preaching the gospel, every message he's ever given. Prophecy, I've got a guy sitting across from me that actually believes in prophecy, but sometimes those are some other issues. But whether it's fear, whether it's lack of training, whether it's some theological issues, we'll address that. But we also want to talk about if we were to mobilize, say, that 26 million that are registered to vote, if we could just get them to go out and vote, we will show you just in maybe the last couple of segments here that that could change all sorts of elections around America. But before we take a break, we are to the very last day of our opportunity for you to give and have your gift matched. And we have a $50,000 matching challenge on the table. And that is, a very generous donor said that I will match dollar for dollar every gift that comes in September. You can look at your calendar, recognize this is the last day, September 30th. I heard just a few minutes ago we were over half, but as usual, a lot of you are waiting to the very last day. Well, you're waiting to the very last few hours because by midnight tonight it is over. So if you would like to support us, and I would certainly hope that you would, today you're hearing things that you have heard nowhere else. I think this is the only third time that George Barna has even talked about some of these issues, and it's the first time certainly on Christian radio. And so you're having a chance to hear some material that's just now coming out. And if you value this and so many other conversations we've had just in the last couple of days with Sean McDowell, and tomorrow we had John Stone Street, we've had Max Lucado, we have all sorts of people on this program. If you value what we do, we certainly encourage you to give. And go to the website right now, pointofview.net. Click on that button that says Salt and Light $50,000 matching challenge, and your gift today will be doubled. So your gift of $50 becomes $100. Your gift of $100 becomes $200. And as I said before, we're more than half, but we are not there yet. And so your gift will be very important, and we need to hear from you. Let's take a break. We'll continue our conversation with Gary Frazier and George Barna right after this.
It is amazing what you can do with a pen and a phone. Really, just a pen and a phone. And no, I'm not talking about what a president can do. I'm talking about what you can do. With a pen and a phone, you can help change a life and change the world. And today, that's what I am urging you to do. Our matching challenge ends today. It's over, done at midnight. We were offered $50,000 if we could get listeners like you to step up and match that donation. Your gift will have double impact, but only if you act right now, today. Use your phone. Call 1-800-347-5151. Or your smartphone. Give online, pointofview.net. Or your pen. Write a check. Send it to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Today is the day. We need your support. 800-347-5151. Pointofview.net and Point of View, Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Gary Frazier in studio with us today. He is the Executive Director of Churches Impacting Culture with United in Purpose, and of course the founder and president of Discovery Missions. And George Barna with us as well, the founder in the past of the Barna Research Group, now known as the Barna Group, and serving now as the Executive Director of the American Culture and Faith Institute, which is a division of United in Purpose. If you'd like to join us, we'll get to those phone calls in just a minute. 1-800-351-1212. But Gary, let me talk for just a minute, maybe with you, about why pastors are not speaking out. Part of that was fear. I think George Barna talked about that. Some maybe fear that they'll lose their tax-exempt status. That doesn't happen. Or maybe just not being equipped. But there is kind of a theological concern, and I thought since you speak so often about prophecy and you always have a gospel message, there are some that think, well, I just want to preach the gospel. I don't want to get into these other issues. Or if the Lord's returning, why do I even bother to go to vote? That's an issue for some Christians and pastors, isn't it?
It is, and it's really astounding to me that anyone takes that position in light of the fact that Jesus himself talked about these various concerns of life. Not only are we to be watching for the return of Jesus, but in the meantime, we are to be salt and light. In the meantime, we're to be impacting our culture. We're to be exposing evil wherever we find it. We're to be upfront about that. We're to highlight that, to speak about that. In addition to that, we're also to be working diligently to preserve the moral foundations of culture that were given to us in the Word of God. And so when a pastor says, well, I'm not going to all I'm going to do is talk about Jesus, well, fine, let's talk about Jesus then. Let's talk about the things that Jesus talked about, because Jesus did not limit his teaching methods only to salvation. He didn't limit it only to talking about heaven and hell, but rather he addressed the issues that were of concern to people in those particular days and time. And by the way, those are timeless truths. Those are things, culture has always dealt with sin and with the repercussions of those choices. So we need to do a more diligent job. I do believe, though, that pastors have to be aware today that we're living in a new day. There's not any middle ground any longer. This administration has made it perfectly clear. They have fired the shot across the bow. They're coming after Christian universities, Christian colleges, and churches. And they are, Kerby, while we've never had a church that has lost its tax-exempt status for speaking on these issues, they're coming after the churches today and these religious institutions with regard to their tax-exempt status, and they're going to use the marriage issue of June 26th, that ruling, they're going to use it against these particular organizations. And so it's time for the pastor who used to be in the middle of the road to understand that there's nothing there anymore but yellow stripes and dead possums. There's no place for the pastor to be. He's going to have to stand up and speak up.
George, let me come to you for just a minute. We talked about those that had 80% response, and again, that's things like abortion and religious liberty and poverty, sexual identity, Israel. If I work down the list, because I happen to have it in front of me here, there's some others of interest as well. Bioethics, all the issues like genetic engineering and organ donation. Islam, a topic that both Gary and I address. Media. It does seem to me that those also are issues that you have really identified as individuals sitting in various churches who want the church to address. And I don't see how you could ignore things like the media right now in light of all the concerns and what that might be doing to children and how we should have moral standards. I don't know how you could avoid the issue of Islam or ISIS. And so you found that those are also very high priority issues for many of the people sitting in the various churches.
Well, I did. And Kirk, let me explain to you that one of the things that the research began to shed light on is the fact that when I asked other questions about how Christians across the country use such information and how they're engaged in the political process and the governance process in our country, one fascinating thing I discovered is that conservative Christians are actually less likely to talk about these issues with their friends, their work associates, their neighbors, family members, than are liberals or moderates. And the reason for that speaks to the very reason why we did this survey, which is that they feel they don't know what to say. They don't know what they believe. They don't know what the Bible teaches. they feel like they're naked when it comes to these kind of conversations. And so they're basically begging their pastor to use the pulpit to help them understand a biblical point of view so that they have a reasonable perspective that they can share with other people. And let me put one other spin on this, too. I think this relates back to the research I've been doing over the last few years about unchurched people. Because one of the things that we found about why we've got such a rapidly growing unchurched population in America is that more and more Americans, particularly middle-aged and younger Americans, feel that organized religion or the local church, however you want to phrase it, is irrelevant to their lives. And one of the reasons I would suggest that they believe it's irrelevant is because the things that they have to confront in their life day after day, when they turn on the news, when they talk at the water cooler, all these kinds of issues that are out there, the church never addresses it. The church treats these issues as if it has nothing to do with real life. And so for people who are looking for a church, they're thinking, gee, is this time well invested if I attend this church, or is it better invested elsewhere? And we can see the conclusion that they've come to.
Yeah, and that's an amazing thing. You know, first of all, what George has done for any preacher, he's given a pastor here about a year's worth of preaching fodder for them to develop and communicate.
Yes.
And I want to tell you, if you want to build a big church today, if pastors really are interested in building a big church, listen, you deal with these issues, and I will tell you, I'm convinced that people will come out of the woodwork to hear a man of God under the anointing of God proclaim the truth of the Word of God and deal with these issues. And I think you'd see people coming all over the place. And so we owe George and his team a great debt of gratitude, that is preachers, because these are key issues, and people are wanting to know, and yet we're not hearing it. So I'm just grateful for this opportunity to have this conversation with George and with you, Kerby, about these issues.
I might just mention, if people say, okay, I want to look at some of this material, we have it there on the website, pointofview.net, God's People Want to Know, and it's research conducted by the American Culture and Faith Institute, Dr. George Barna, Executive Director, and that will give you a chance to look what that list might be. Let's, if we can, for just a minute, because I know we're coming up to another break, talk about what can be done even in terms of voter turnout. We've certainly spent a fair amount of time, Gary, talking about what we can do for the pastors, and certainly any pastor listening or any member of a congregation that wants to pass this on to the pastor can do so. But you have a Get Out the Vote campaign, and you've been able to identify some of those 26 million people that are registered to vote but did not vote. And give us an example of how that worked out.
Well, Kerby, I think one of the things that's important is that so many people have taken the posture that, number one, they're uninformed, they're disengaged, they don't think their vote matters anymore. They're so frustrated and fed up with what's happening in Washington. They have this opinion that nothing that the average person cares about is being appropriately addressed and so forth. So they've just decided, hey, I'm going to be absentee. But one of the things that I'm excited about with regard to United in Purpose is that not only do we have Get Out the Vote campaigns and other things, but there's a strategy out there that I think that people listening to us today would be thrilled to know about. One of those strategies had to do with, for example, the 2014 midterms. Now, at this particular time, I was not a part of the team, but I've looked at what happened at that particular point during the midterm elections and was so excited about it because I can see how that also can be effective for 2016. And that is that this organization identifies the key Senate races because we all believed in 2014 that if we could win control of the Senate, we would see some major changes take place. We thought if we could get rid of Harry Reid and that bunch of, then when we were going to have an opportunity to do something. Unfortunately, we didn't realize how the depth of the depravity of the leadership in the Senate and also in the House as well. But what happened was our organization was able to identify through the cooperation of about 75 different partner organizations, such as Family Research Council, American Family AFA, Concerned Women for America, Salt and Light, Liberty Council, on and on and on. Our partners have been so kind to provide us with so much data that we've been able then to do extensive research through our tech division and so forth, and they've been able to determine, or were able to determine in 2014, that in the midterm elections, there were key battleground states with key Senate races and key congressional races, and so they were able to come up with a number that combined if we could only get 469,000 additional votes in 2014 in the midterms, that we actually could win the Senate, keep the House and so forth, and make an incredible difference. Well, to just give you one particular case study, which we like to talk about, and we'll do that in a moment when we come back.
We'll talk about that because for those of you in Alaska, you know the story, but for the rest of the people in the lower 48 states, we'll talk about that in just a minute. We do have to take one of those mandatory breaks. Gary Frazier with us, George Barna. We'll come back and talk about how that worked out in that particular midterm Senate election, but it's just one illustration of many other examples, and an illustration that maybe if we get people educated, informed, and voting, we could turn some things around very quickly. We'll be right back.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Gary Frazier in studio, George Barna by phone, and we only have a few more minutes, and I thought I'd give some action items along the way so we don't run out of time at the end. And one of those, I think, Gary, is obviously to take this information, and we have it available on the website, pointofview.net. If they want to print it all out at 16 pages, but if they just want to print out the first couple of pages, they have it. And, of course, there's some other articles we've made available as well so that they can then go to their pastor and say, you know, we really need to address these issues, and these surveys say that I'm not the only one in the congregation that would like these issues addressed. And so that's the first step. And number two, to recognize that there are some people working behind the scenes to really get out the vote. And even churches can be involved in that. There are places where churches could have a voter registration card and make sure everybody's registered to vote. I know your Project 75 is to hope to mobilize 75% of church members to vote. Because look how different that would be if 75% of the 90 million Christians voted. That would change elections overnight, wouldn't it?
It really would, Kerby. One of the things, though, I wanted to continue on real quick, like just one quick illustration of what United in Purpose has done through our partner organizations. As I mentioned a moment ago, we identified the fact that in 2014, in the midterms, we needed 469,000 additional votes in key battleground areas to take charge of the Senate, of course, to increase our number of seats in the House and so forth. Well, just one state in particular is an illustration. We like to talk about Alaska in general because it's pretty simplistic, and we know that there are a lot of other people working in states, but we were certainly there. But what we found was to win a key Senate seat, we needed 6,000 additional votes. Now, we knew that from our data that there were about 135 or so thousand Democrats in Alaska as opposed to about 72,000 conservative or Republican voters. And so we began to, through our research, we identified another 17,000 voters who were conservative who didn't vote in the previous elections. And so we started messaging those people and asking them to go to a website and to pledge that they would vote in 2014. 16,000 pledged that they would, in fact, vote. Of the 16,000 that voted, 12,500 of them, in fact, honored their pledge. They went to the poll. They voted. In the meantime, there were 7,600 additional Democrats that voted as well, and we ended up winning that seat by 14 votes. We needed 6,000. We got 6,014. We could talk about Colorado, some other states that came into play as well. This is a strategy that actually works in mobilizing voters to stand up, speak up, cast their vote. Now, for 2016, I just want to tell you, we are confident that in 2016, we're going to change the White House. We're going to get 60 seats in the Senate. We're going to keep the House. And we know we're not naive. We know that we cannot change culture in America. This change that we've been under, that's been taking place, has been going on for a long time. So we're not naive to think that we can change it with an election. But we do believe this, that we can stop or at least slow down the bleeding that's taking place, this all-out attack on Christianity in America, on moral values. We believe that we can impact that in the next election. But here's what it's going to take. We now have identified that we need 701,000 additional votes in 11 battleground states. We're going to be working in those states with our partner groups and so forth in this 400 or so days that we have prior to the election. But we need our listeners, people who are listening to you and pastors and so forth. We need people informing pastors that that now's the time to step up. Now is the time to go to these websites. Every church ought to be on the Project 75 website and every pastor ought to commit himself to moving that needle from about 60% of his congregation up to 75%, because we can make a huge difference in that arena. In addition to that, having the tools available such as championthevote.org, Get Out the Vote, and there's so many different websites that they can utilize and tools that are available to them as well. In addition to that, later on, and I'm sure you and I are going to have a conversation about this, we're actually going to be standing up an army of volunteers later into the spring and early summer of 2016 that will be involved in working on call teams, that'll be sending out emails and so forth, because we're going to be asking these 26 million, as many of them as we can touch, to pledge to vote and then to actually do it. And at the end of the day, on November the 9th of 2016, I think by the grace of God and combined with the efforts of God's people, I think we're going to be able to say, Lord, thank you for giving us one more chance to get it right. And that's our prayer. That's the desire of our hearts, is that we might have the opportunity. God, give us one more chance to do the right thing, to stand up, to speak out, to mobilize, to engage. And if you do that, we'll do our very best to make good on that.
George Barna, just before we ran out of time, I wanted to get from you any thoughts about how people can use this resource that we're making available and that you have put together. God's people want to know. It seems to me that the first step is to take this to your pastor and say, these are some issues that we really need to hear from the pulpit.
Yeah, Kerby, I think that's great. You got to start there by informing the pastor about it. Secondly, I think it's important to ask the pastor, would you please preach about these things? I mean, not just to inform them, but to encourage them to do something with the information. But thirdly, knowing that a lot of them are going to be fearful of doing it for whatever reason or choose not to do it. That might be their natural inclination. Part of that is that they're worried that they're going to get too much negative feedback, too much pushback. And so if I, as a person in my church, can get a whole group of people around this issue and say, look, why don't we go to the pastor together, or why don't we all sign a letter and send it to him and tell him, look, pastor, if you will inform us what the Bible teaches about these things, people give you a hard time, we got your back. We're going to support you. We'll go deal with them on your behalf because we feel it is so important for our own growth. And I think one of the ways to help pastors get a grip on this is for them not to see this as we're asking you to preach politics. Mm-hmm. We're asking you to preach the Bible.
Amen.
And we're not asking you to get involved in, conservative, liberal, moderate, etc. What we're asking you to do is help us develop a biblical worldview. We perceive that to be part of your job, and that's part of our desire. And so if we can work together on that, that's great. And then part of the way that as believers we make this stuff real in our lives is we've got to take it and use it. Mm. So talk to people about what we learn, because that helps us. The more that we can articulate what we've learned, the more that we begin to own that information and that perspective. Plus, it then gives us the opportunity for us to be change agents in this culture. It's not waiting for those other people to change the culture. Now we have a role because we can speak up articulately and biblically on these particular matters.
I might just mention we have a number of links. One is churchesimpactingculture.com, so you can find some of this information. We have this PDF that was made available through the American Culture and Faith Institute, which again is part of United in Purpose, written by Dr. George Barna. And so again, Gary Frazier, George Barna, always great to have you on the program with me today.
Hey, thank you so much, Kerby, for giving us the privilege to be with you.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
We need to take a break, and when we come back, we will get into some of the issues of the day. One of those is abortion. I mean, we've been talking about Planned Parenthood, and we are certainly wanting to equip you on some very important issues in that regard, so we will be doing that as well. Let me just mention, though, just before we take a break, that time is running out. Matter of fact, time is almost out completely. And again, we have our $50,000 matching fund. The deadline is midnight tonight, and if you have not responded, this would be a very good time to do so. So please take the time, even during the break, to visit the website, pointofview.net. Click on the button that says Salt and Light, $50,000 matching challenge. We talked about being the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Well, this is one way to do so. And as you have heard today, there are strategies in place to really begin to change the direction of our nation and our culture. You are part of that, and we want to equip you, empower you, and encourage you to do so. One aspect of that, of course, is to support this ministry. And if you can do so, we would appreciate your gift right now. Because those gifts are doubled, your gift of $50 becomes $100. A gift of $100 becomes $200. So consider what you might do. Visit our website, pointofview.net. We'll be back with more right after this.
It is amazing what you can do with a pen and a phone. Really, just a pen and a phone. And no, I'm not talking about what a president can do. I'm talking about what you can do. With a pen and a phone, you can help change a life and change the world. And today, that's what I am urging you to do. Our matching challenge ends today. It's over, done at midnight. We were offered $50,000 if we could get listeners like you to step up and match that donation. Your gift will have double impact, but only if you act right now, today. Use your phone. Call 1-800-347-5151. Or your smartphone. Give online, pointofview.net. Or your pen. Write a check. Send it to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Today is the day. We need your support. 800-347-5151. pointofview.net and Point of View, Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I'm constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, we're going to spend some time talking about abortion. Of course, that is very obvious because of the fact that Cecile Richards was testifying yesterday before Congress. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But also, we want to get into these arguments and counter-arguments. And that's why I thought it would be so good to get Dave Sterrett in studio with us again. He's been on the program with us many times before. He's a speaker, a writer, and an ethicist. And he is the founder of Disruptive Truth. He's been on the program before with us as we've had him and Josh McDowell talk about various books that they've co-authored. Why Trust Jesus? Is the Bible True? Of course, probably best known more recently for the I Am Second book. And of course, a lot of people are familiar with I Am Second. New book out, though, Aborting Aristotle, Examining Fatal Fallacies in the Abortion Debate. Holds graduate degrees from the University of Dallas as well as Southern Evangelical Seminary. And Dave, always great to have you in studio.
Oh, well, it's great to be in the studio, Kerby. Just thank you so much for your bold witness, for taking a stand for truth and getting the message out there.
Well, and again, I know you're going to be speaking at Yale as well as Wisconsin. I know you got a conference in Chicago on this book.
Yes.
We'll mention the book a little bit along the way and get into some of the details, but we saw yesterday an attempt by the head of Planned Parenthood to try to justify the selling of baby parts and abortion. And I'd love to get your initial reaction. I have some as well, and we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about the Planned Parenthood videos. Bill Nye the Science Guy, I've been watching his videos, and I've done a commentary that will be coming out on that. So there's just a whole lot of things to talk about. What about the testimony yesterday? What are your thoughts?
You know, one thing about Cecile Richards is that her testimony was not true. It was not accurate. There were several interesting takeaways. I think one of the things that she has brought up, that others have brought up, is that she talks about it being deceptively edited.
Yes. Okay.
And we have all this. It's all online. And I was just reading here. There's been several great rebuttals, but there's been research done to these videos that shows that these videos were not edited, that they're not deceptively edited. They may be edited just
for time and space.
Yeah. But the facts are the facts. And this is not just one of her staff members. These are multiple of her key leaders who are selling body parts, and then the talking about the specific body parts and so forth like that. And my concern has been that this is she again tried to make the appeal to breast cancer, which was interesting, but when asked, again, the truth is she finally admitted that Planned Parenthood does not do mammograms.
Yes.
And this is a lie that, President Obama has also said in the general public, that Planned Parenthood does mammograms. They do not. And I thought it was great that she finally admitted yesterday that they do not do that.
There were a lot of back and forth about the fact that there only seems to be one particular political party that receives any kind of donations from Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
And that was the Democratic Party. And, of course, they went back and forth on some of those issues as well. But, Dave, one of the more disturbing statistics that has surfaced is when people have been asked, do you think we should defund Planned Parenthood? A majority of Americans say, no, I don't think we should defund it. And I'm not surprised, given the fact that they're always talking about deceptively editing. Well, here's the other. There's been a censoring of Planned Parenthood videos. A while back, we've had some people on with the Media Research Center, and Brent Bozell in a column a while back pointed out that if you look at the videos that have been shown on the mainstream media, and by that I mean ABC, CBS, and NBC, they actually spent more time talking about the killing of Cecil the Lion than they did talking about Cecile Richards and Planned Parenthood.
Yes.
So if most Americans don't see the videos, or don't maybe even know they exist. And even when they're covered, maybe they hear a lot of explanations like these were deceptively edited. I'm not really surprised that right now a majority of Americans saying, no, maybe we shouldn't defund Planned Parenthood.
Right. I think that we need to watch these videos and also study really who is and what is Planned Parenthood. I read an article about this on Disruptive Truth. What is Planned Parenthood really? Mm-hmm. And I had a picture of a little lion, and the lion was saying something like, that Cecile Richards is just as radical as the founder, Margaret Sanger, from the very get-go. This was an organization that had the ideologies of eugenics to minimize unwanted people groups that she called unfit. And as you see today, like even this brand new Planned Parenthood here in Dallas, that's huge. Well, the mega center is in the black community, is in Oak Cliff.
Yes.
And so that is
same thing in Houston.
Yes, in Houston
places
as well.
Yeah.
So it's really sad. It breaks my heart.
Well, again, as I pointed out, the survey found that a majority of Americans don't think we should defund Planned Parenthood. But a poll that I found recently showed that a majority of Americans had not even heard of Planned Parenthood selling baby parts. So, in some respects, the poll that has just come out reinforces that they haven't heard. And for people that want to actually dig into that, my commentary that came out actually September 3rd, goes into the fact that Brent Bozell, after looking at all the footage, and that's what they do at Media Research Center, concluded that there were only 23 minutes that actually were spent on that. And interestingly enough, when you go back and look at where the actual video was, where they actually showed it on the screen, that was 73 seconds. And that broke down to something that was even more embarrassing. CBS had 1 minute of the footage. NBC had 13 seconds of the video, and ABC never showed 1 second of video. So if they've heard about it, it's always been in the negative, and they've never seen the video.
Yes.
So, you can see why we are in many cases not having a great outcry for that. And even there, I saw something that was interesting in the latest surveys. They showed a very high percentage of, say, those who identify themselves as pro-life, very concerned about the videos. Those who defended the idea of abortion, they weren't as concerned. And so they're, again, trying to deal with this in one way or another. So those are some very important issues that we need to pay attention to. And I suspect that Planned Parenthood, as we've just heard, will continue to be funded because the United States Senate capitulated.
Well, Kerby,
but this is a battle that's going to have to just take place over the next couple of years. Go ahead.
Well, they're hard to watch. I mean, it's not a fun, entertaining experience to see these high level Planned Parenthood executives and doctors talking about children and their body parts and laughing over wine, and then to see the body parts themselves. It is very hard to watch, but I think we need to be reminded of other evils in our time. I mean, it was just a generation ago in World War II that many German Christians said, we don't want to think about these Nazi prison camps that are in our neighborhood. It's just too hard. We don't want to think about it. We want to just keep singing, but this is in our neighborhoods and we need to pray. And that's why I'm excited to serve on the board of 40 Days for Life, that we can pray outside of these abortion facilities, these Planned Parenthoods, because we need a heart change as well.
Yes, and you work for 40 Days for Life and it's still on the board. We already have lots of phone calls coming in, so if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. But in addition to talking about what's in the news, we also want to equip you a little bit, and I want to pick out maybe one or two arguments that those who support abortion use and have Dave Sterrett respond. Bill Nye, the science guy, I think needs to go back to science class, but we'll explain why I think there are some concerns with some of those YouTube videos out about that as well. And so we're going to try to give you some answers and equip you in that way. And of course, if you want to be equipped, first of all, we have a very good link to Disruptive Truth, so you can find all of that about Dave Sterrett on the website. And we also have a way in which you could get a copy of his book, Aborting Aristotle, Examining Fatal Fallacies in the Abortion Debate. Much more coming up right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Doubt is something that we all face, and all of us have doubts, but these shouldn't lead to confusion, hopelessness, and unbelief. Doubts can often deepen our dependence on God and give us empathy for others. Pastor Bobby Conway was on my radio program recently to talk about his new book, Doubting Towards Faith, The Journey to Confident Christianity. Sean McDowell wrote the foreword to the book, and he was also on my radio program recently and talked about doubt. Bobby Conway reminds us that there are different forms of doubt: emotional doubt, intellectual doubt, volitional doubt, and evidential doubt. He also has 2 chapters on the doubt triggers in our world today. These range from questions about alleged contradictions in the Bible to moral and ethical questions found in the Bible. And he reminds us that Jesus can handle our doubts. After all, Thomas had questions and doubts. Jesus did not condemn him, but answered his questions and provided evidence for his doubts. In the foreword and his radio interview with me, Sean McDowell shared how doubts first hit him as a college student. He sat down with his father to share his doubts. Josh McDowell responded, I think it's great that you want to find truth. This actually gave Sean room to pursue his questions and resolve his doubts. It allowed him to make the faith of his parents his own faith. He discovered that doubts don't have to be the end of faith. They can often be the impetus for the development of a deeper, more genuine faith. And of course, you have to be intentional in your search for truth. So I would say that if you have doubts or know someone who has doubts, this is an excellent book to read and pass on to others. It is well written and immensely practical. And as some of us have said, we wish we had this book when we were growing up and asking good questions that few, if any, seem to be able to answer. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Prayer is a powerful weapon. From Provident Films and Affirm Films comes War Room, now playing rated PG. More information at warroomthemovie.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Dave Sterrett with us. He's an apologist and writer, as well as an ethicist, founder of Disruptive. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Calls are coming. These videos have come out, and these videos were produced by an organization that was really trying to explain what was happening, and it's called the Center for Medical Progress. Well, then you have the editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. I mean, this is a very kind of prestigious, kind of medical elite group, and they defended Planned Parenthood and I love that. Let's criticize the people that did the videos, not what was being done on the videos. But Wesley J. Smith has talked about the fact that he has found that the medical elite's view of life is what he says, based on each individual's cognitive capacities. In other words, you're not really a person unless you're coherent, unless you're self-aware. And so as a result, an embryo is not a person. Of course, you could also apply that to somebody's in a coma or somebody has Alzheimer's. But talk about that for just a minute, because that's one of the arguments. They say, well, the unborn baby doesn't really have self-awareness. They're not a person, so we will deny its humanity. How do you respond to that?
Yes, the different forms of this argument, which is known as the functional view of argument, is what the philosophers at the universities like Peter Singer, like David Boonin, at different levels, they will try to have some criteria that if this function is not working properly, then you're not a person. But in response, and this is what we do in Aborting Aristotle, is that we talk that we are human beings by nature, by the type of being that we are, not based upon our function. And an example of this would be, for example, let's suppose that we found a dog and that the function of that dog could not bark, right? Well, that wouldn't mean that that dog is not a dog just because that particular dog can't bark, right?
Right.
And likewise, with the level of consciousness, we know that this comes and goes. But again, even if that is not exactly working properly, it is still a human being. And we know this from science. In fact, the leading defenders of abortion, like Michael Tooley, says this. He actually goes after, the University of Colorado, he goes after the pro-life proponents for placing too much emphasis on the scientific fact of the child being human. And that's why he says one of the crucial questions involved in the issue of morality of abortion is that the moral significance of the purely biological facts, such as the fetus belonging to a certain species. And so then they try to go after them and say, well, you're just holding these species as higher than others. And it is true. Humans are exceptional by very nature because of the kind of being they are, not based on their function.
Sure, created in the image of God, and that's certainly a powerful argument as well. But the downside of that argument is that you could, and I remember Joseph Fletcher arguing that, what if we ever have an ape that shows self-awareness and cognitive ability? Should that one be declared a person? He said yes. So you can see that he's no longer looking in the kind of categories we are. So one of the arguments, and again, in Dave Sterrett's book, about 100 pages, it's a little more academic and philosophical, but that's an intent to really respond at that level to those kinds of arguments. And I think you're going to find it really helpful, and it's available on our webpage. And of course, you can also find out more about him at Disruptive Truth, which we have at the website as well. Let's take some phone calls because the phones are ringing and we want to hear from you. Let's go to Arizona first. KNLB. Sam, you're on with Dave Sterrett.
Yes, appreciate you guys. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I'm sure you're familiar with Alan Sears at the Alliance Defending Freedom.
Yes.
Yes,
absolutely. And they made 11 YouTube videos exposing, I should say, revealing the truth about how to defund Planned Parenthood. It's called Defund PP dash the truth. And it's really 11 of them. They're excellent videos. They had one of the young ladies that worked there make the videos. It's very professional. And it really explains a lot of the lies we've been told.
Well, and I really appreciate that. We will see if we can find a link to that.
That is the link. It's called Defund PP the truth. My daughter works there, actually.
Perfect. Well, then, okay, we'll see if we can get that up there. And everybody else probably just wrote it down right now and started going to those videos. So
actually, she made the video. But anyway.
Well, then you deserve high credit. Tell her thank you for doing that yeoman's work, because that has got to take some time and effort.
Really, really good. And I thought you guys, I thought you might know about it, but if you don't, it's excellent. It's excellent material. Thank you.
Well, we'll certainly get that. Love ADF, Alliance Defending Freedom, actually was Alliance Defense Fund, and Marlon Maddox, who was the original host of Point of View, and many others, D. James Kennedy and Bill Bright, and you go down to all sorts of individuals, Jim Dobson, Larry Burkett, were part of the initial starting of that. And, of course, Alan Sears and I have been in various events over the years, and I've had a chance to interview him, and we've had a chance to interact at various conferences, and so I just think the world of ADF. So go and find that material. Okay, he mentioned YouTube video. Got to talk about this for just a minute before we take some more phone calls, and that is Bill Nye's the Science Guy, right?
Right.
Okay, a great piece by Robert George. We know him at Princeton, and Patrick Lee. He makes all sorts of, quote, scientific arguments for why those of us who are pro-life are really out to lunch. And one of those, he argues, is that because we have embryos that are fertilized that don't implant, that then we have a situation in which, well, then you're not being consistent, because after all, there are some individuals that come into the world as an embryo, but they never are born because they do not implant. So that is a good argument for abortion, or for the fact that we should not, and he sometimes goes to extremes, saying we should not sue people that have a fertilized egg go through her body, or we should not criminalize those activities. But, of course, that doesn't work very well, does it, Dave? Because if you think about this, we've had a time when we have had a high rate of infant mortality in undeveloped countries. But we don't say that just because babies die after they're born, they're not humans. But somehow he wants to use this as an argument against any kind of regulation or any kind of attempt to outlaw abortion. Your thoughts?
Kerby, you're exactly right. And Bill Nye, he is just unaware of what is being argued at the by the leading philosophers and scientists. They are acknowledging that it is an embryological fact that the unborn are human, are a member of the species Homo sapiens, just as Michelin Matthews Roth at Harvard Medical School stated. She said, "We know from embryology that a new life begins with the formation of the zygote, the cell formed from the union of the egg and the sperm and fertilization. And this is scientific fact, not religious doctrine." And so he's coming up not with a scientific argument, but a bad philosophical argument. And the truth is, I think you really nailed it. Just because there's a high loss of embryos that do not implant does not mean that it's morally permissible for us to intentionally make that happen or speed up the process, just like in other countries, as you mentioned, that there's sometimes a high infant loss, but it does not mean that we have the moral right to speed that process up and to add to it.
I may indeed put that article up there because in a couple of cases there, Robert George, professor at Princeton University, pro-life advocate, and others, says that what you have here are what are called a non sequitur. And if you haven't had a logic class, that's where your conclusion does not follow from your original statement. And he uses at least 3 or 4 major non sequiturs in his little video, which is getting a lot of press. But I thought real quickly we'd give you a short answer on that one. And there are so many other very good answers in Dave Sterrett's book, Aborting Aristotle, Examining Fatal Fallacies in the Abortion Debate, or you might look for this piece by Robert George and Patrick Lee. It appeared in National Review. Back to the science class for the science guy. But let's take a break. When we come back, we have almost a full bank of phone calls, so if indeed you get a busy signal, then just wait, and as a caller drops off, you can join us. But I did want to take just another moment to mention that we are really coming to the end. The deadline is September 30th. It happens at midnight. Time is running out, and if you've said, well, I've been meaning to actually take advantage of this matching fund, this would be the time to do so, even as we go to a break. And so let me encourage you to take the time to visit the website, pointofview.net, and you can click on there. If you say, well, I don't have a computer, okay, well, then you can simply call a different number than we make available, and that is to actually make your gift 1-800-347-5151. That's not the on-air line, that's the order line number, but that's also a place where you can give. 1-800-347-5151, or of course just simply go to the website pointofview.net. This $50,000 matching fund is something that, again, a generous donor made available, and I appreciate that, but I also recognize that we don't want to leave money on the table, and there is a possibility that that match will not go up to $50,000. It's up to more than $25,000 last time I heard, and know some more money's coming in, but we would certainly like to be able to meet that obligation and that opportunity, and that would help us greatly because of a rather slow summer that we've had. And so if you can help us out, please take the time to visit the website, pointofview.net, and we will take a break and then take a whole lot more phone calls. Lots to talk about still on this issue of abortion and Planned Parenthood. We will do so right after these messages.
It is amazing what you can do with a pen and a phone. Really, just a pen and a phone. And no, I'm not talking about what a president can do. I'm talking about what you can do. With a pen and a phone, you can help change a life and change the world. And today, that's what I am urging you to do. Our matching challenge ends today. It's over, done at midnight. We were offered $50,000 if we could get listeners like you to step up and match that donation. Your gift will have double impact, but only if you act right now, today. Use your phone. Call 1-800-347-5151. Or your smartphone. Give online, pointofview.net. Or your pen. Write a check. Send it to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Today is the day. We need your support. 800-347-5151. Pointofview.net and Point of View, Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, if you'd like to join our conversation, we have in studio with us today Dave Sterrett, and he is the author of quite a number of books, but also the most recent one, Aborting Aristotle. I think I also noticed you have another one coming out, We Choose Life. Is that coming out too?
Yes, that's coming out in January, and that there is, Aborting Aristotle was more of the academic, but We Choose Life is a collection of 20 stories, and the idea came from several years ago when we put out the I Am Second book with all these stories, and I thought, I'm meeting so many individuals from different walks of life, former Planned Parenthood, workers like Ramona Trevino, the pastor's kid who took his, girlfriend to have an abortion, who later found forgiveness in Christ, just a variety of different perspectives. So that'll be out January 1st, but you can pre-order at Amazon or ChristianBook.com.
And Chris, again, we have a link to you. I might just mention some of the resources that we do have on the website. First of all, if you click on the picture of Dave Sterrett, that will, of course, take you to disruptivetruth.com. And there's a lot there, I might just mention. So you might want to spend a little bit of time there. If you find yourself saying, I'd be really interested in this book, trying to understand the fatal fallacies in the abortion debate, then you can click on that. And that'll take you to a website where you can order it. And, of course, you might be able to look for it in your local bookstore, but it's a little more academic, so it's probably one you want to order online. And we have lots of phone calls, so let's give you a chance to join the conversation today. Brandy in North Carolina on the Good News Network, what would you say to us today?
Yeah, I'm kind of hearing that the government is getting some kind of kickback from Planned Parenthood. Now, obviously, if that's true, they're not going to be in any hurry to deal with this issue. What do you know about that?
What I do know is what was part of the testimony yesterday, and that is when you look at all of the contributions that come from Planned Parenthood to various candidates, 100% of those were Democratic candidates. And so as a number of individuals pointed out yesterday in the hearing, it's really difficult for you to want to defund an organization that has supported your campaign. So that's the first issue. Now, you are raising a bigger issue about kickbacks, and you do wonder if something like this might surface. The Center for Medical Progress has not made that argument so far, but I think we'll see how this investigation unfolds over the next couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you for that.
Well, thank you for calling in. Let's take another phone call. We'll head out to Arizona, KNLB. Sharon, what would you like to add to the conversation today?
My husband had a question. If these, quote, fetuses are fetuses and not human babies, then why are they selling the parts? What are they going to use the parts for if it's not for humans?
Yeah, I mean, if it's not a human, then why is it not a human? And why is it going to be used for other humans? I mean, I think you see the argument there. It's a good one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've never heard anyone ask that, and I would love our government, our senators, to ask that question. Why do you want these if they're not human parts?
And again, they're so valuable because they are human, and then because they are created. And so I think you've got a really good point. Any other comment before I let you go?
Pardon me?
Yeah, any other comments? Because I think that's the good one.
I love your program. Just keep fighting.
Appreciate that. What about this? Part of the problem, I think, Dave, and it gets back into your book a little bit, is that you have people that have really said, well, okay, maybe it's human in the sense it's Homo sapiens, but it's not a person. And this goes all the way back to the 1973 decision of Roe versus Wade, in which the argument was made that this unborn baby, they didn't call him that, but a fetus is not truly human or not a person until later on. So it really kind of created a schism between humanhood and personhood. And since the 14th Amendment only protects persons, that's kind of the argument. But we recognize that a human being is a person, right?
Yes, and that's what I argue in this book. And it gets very philosophical, but I think it's good for parents and students to know this. And I make the case that all humans are persons.
Yes.
But it is true. It is not necessarily true. They bring up that it's possible for a person not to be human. Well, as Christians, we hold to this. For example, we hold that the Godhead is one God, three distinct persons. We believe, and what I do is going back to Boatheus, and Augustine and also St. Thomas Aquinas. And the idea that a person is a substance of a rational nature. Now, we get a little philosophical in these chapters here, but it's very important to, and what we get into is that there's a unity between being a human and being a person. And every single human is a person, not based upon this function or that function, but based on the very fact that they belong to the species Homo sapiens.
Well, and the problem with that is once you separate humanity from personhood,
right,
which is what the Supreme Court did, you have all sorts of problems, because what they did is they said, okay, well, it's not really a person, and there could not be any compelling interest to protect the unborn until after viability. Well, viability in 1973 is not viability today. As a matter of fact, we have these young children that are made kind of right now making the rounds around Congress. Some that were born out of biology save those, so that doesn't work very well. The other one gets back to when we talked about consciousness. Well, you know, every argument for abortion, saying, well, an unborn baby's not conscious, could also be an argument for euthanasia, infanticide, because you could say, well, somebody that
now, the terminology may be distinct, but there is no separation, and that's what we argue for.
Sharon, you asked a good question, and if we got a little too philosophical, let's bring it back to planet Earth here, because we certainly do want to give you some very helpful arguments if you're trying to make the pro-life case. We'll head out to New Hampshire this time, WSEW. Cindy, thank you for calling today.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm in my car.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, good. Thank you for taking my call. I was listening to NPR this morning, and they had some clips of this the president of Planned Parenthood, and she went at the very beginning of her talk. She made very clear 4 points, and one of them was that what they're doing is not illegal, and that under the Reagan administration and the Clinton administration, laws were passed which makes what they're doing not illegal. And I'm hearing from Christian radio and other sources that it is illegal. And I'm just wondering, is she stretching the truth? Or is there some truth to what she's saying? Do you know anything about the legality of what they're talking about?
And again, I try not to get into the deep weeds too much, but yes, there are various regulations that have to do with can you ever have access to various parts. And this was developed a little bit during the Reagan administration, but you're right, more during the Clinton administration, and even a little bit under George W. Bush's administration, because remember, we had the debate first about fetal tissue experimentation, then we had the ongoing debate about stem cell research, and you might remember one of the most important presentations that's where some people wonder whether they've crossed the line.
Yes, and they have crossed the line. It seems that these videos have really provided some good evidence that there are negotiating over the prices and talking about a greater price for this, full intact and so forth, that key executives and Planned Parenthood physicians are haggling and negotiating over the prices. And what's very interesting about this is originally Cecile Richards tried to deny that they were doing this all together.
Right, there's your point.
And she had this statement, she speaks so confidently, but her first video that Planned Parenthood released, she was saying that we do not do this. And then now she's trying to argue that it's legal. And she doesn't even seem, to acknowledge what her own staff is saying.
Let me take 3 points because we're coming to a break of where I think there are some issues. Number one, we have seen videos where they talk about crushing the right parts of the baby in order to get the most baby parts to sell. That kind of violates that, at least in the spirit of the law, if not the actual law. Number two, you have videos of people separating out all the parts. And then you have officials, as you just spent a minute ago, haggling over the price amount of money for a whole baby versus the parts. To say that all of that is within the law, that's sure stretching it for me, and I'll leave that to people with better legal understanding than I do, but that's the concern that I have. Unfortunately, I think some of those laws shouldn't have existed in the first place, but that's a different discussion, and we'll have that right after these important messages.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Dave Sterrett in studio. Might mention his book, Aborting Aristotle, is just out, and one coming up, We Choose Life, Authentic Stories. So lots of great opportunities for you to find out a little bit more about some of these issues on abortion. And just before we go back to the phones, any other issues? What about this issue of maybe informed consent?
Sure. That's another great concern that many people had who watch these videos, even people who are kind of on the fence about the ethics of abortion, is now saying that it seems very clear that you have these physicians who are telling and with their documents having their patients sign and then in the documents with informed consent, but then the physicians not being open and honest about them breaking those initial procedures that they told their patients they would do in order to clamp down here or to preserve this body part. And so that's why another reason we should defund Planned Parenthood immediately.
Yeah, and they were pressuring them, and in some cases even doing it without consent. So, I mean, there's just a couple of issues that, and again, I'll leave that to government officials and lawyers to sort out, but certainly seems like there's some major issues that have surfaced.
In fact, I was just looking here, that doctors were even required to sign that no substantive alteration in the timing of terminating the pregnancy or the method used was made for the purpose of obtaining the tissue. Well, we have on video now that Planned Parenthood these physicians are not keeping to their word, for doing this.
Well, I think Cindy asked a good question, and we could go on, but I want to give a few more of you a chance to join the conversation. So let's go out to California. Chris, what would you like to add to the conversation?
Hi, how are you guys doing today?
Very good.
Good.
Well, I had a few things to say. One of them is that, on one of those videos, STEM Express was mentioned.
Yes.
That's actually the town I live in.
Wow.
And we made, the Bill O'Reilly. My dad called me and said, hey, we made the news because we got STEM Express. Nobody in this county knew what was going on there. It's a very conservative county.
Amazing.
There's not even one abortion clinic in this county. It's very conservative. And, nobody knew what was going on. It was kind of like they're trying to hide it. You know what I mean?
You can see why they would want to.
And it's odd because, nobody knew what was going on. I mean, it's totally videos. You see the videos that were taking place.
Mm-hmm.
I recognize the restaurants. I've been there. I've driven past this building.
Isn't that amazing? That helps answer, Chris, the question that some people had. Was this a setup, or these actors? Or, of course, it's not. But, again, you've just added some authenticity to the videos. And I want to keep on, but I want to see if I can just get a few more calls in here before we run out of time. And so many of you wanted to respond today, so I'm giving you that opportunity. Let's head to Texas this time. KBJS. Sharon, thank you for joining today.
Thank you, Kerby. I appreciate it. I was listening to your dissertation there about the species and that trying to make a differentiation between us being a species and a human being.
Sure.
They're so inconsistent because you're not allowed to kill or destroy a bald eagle egg because it's a bald eagle.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah.
And that's a protected species. Yeah, it's protected.
Kill a bald eagle in the womb, and oh my.
Non-human species running around. It's just absolutely ludicrous. I can't really believe we're having this discussion.
I can't either. Again, think if I have a bald eagle egg, because obviously not a womb, because it's and I drop it. I mean, you just can imagine people would be horrified, or you have a little panda that is crawling over its mother, and you take it and decide to do experiments on it. I mean, the outrage that would come if you did experiments on a newborn panda or something like that. Can you imagine? And yet here, there's such a callousness about what we're doing to human beings. There's something very sick about our society, and that is a great illustration. Go.
I have a question, though,
Sure.
too. I heard a small blurb. I don't believe it was on your program, but somewhere during this debate, about the chemicals that they use for abortions, and that they have changed those chemicals because they want to preserve the tissue, and the chemicals that they used earlier were very destructive.
Right. They used to use saline abortion. It would sear the skin and everything. And again, if these are prized organs that you're going to make a lot of money on, then you don't want to sear them with an abortion chemical of some sorts.
Well, it was my understanding from what they were saying in that report that originally in the Roe versus the Wade decision, that there was, and there's the debate that went on afterwards, that there were some stipulations put on there that they were not allowed to change those with the intent of saving body parts.
There you go. And that's another one you put on the table, which, of course, again, will let all the investigators dig all that up and see what they can find. But I suspect there's a concern there as well.
Okay, I didn't know if you had any additional information about that.
Don't, but it'll be something we'll look for. Dave, I know you're going to be researching this because, again, you've worked with 40 Days for Life. And, of course, I know at disruptivetruth.com you're doing all sorts of work. So I'll let you turn you loose and see what you can find out on that one, right?
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, I think you brought up multiple very good points. And the truth is, I think there's an awareness that we really do know. I mean, as bad as it is selling body parts, it's evil as that is. These people who say, well, you shouldn't be making these videos and you shouldn't be deceiving. Really, the questions we ask is, well, what is the basis of your morality? And on one hand, they want to claim, the other side wants to claim relativism, but we know that there are objective truths. And as y'all brought up, you know, National Geographic did this, provided all these beautiful pictures of these unborn elephants, unborn dolphins. And I mean, you could see what they are, but what if you went in there and you took one of these little unborn elephants or these unborn, you know, lions, and you began, you know, removing their body parts and poking it and then eventually killed it? I mean, there would be an uproar in society. Society would say, no way. You know, and there'd be boycotts and all types of things. You know, you would have these leftist celebrities crying and everything else, saying that you shouldn't do these to these little unborn animals.
Wow. Dave Sterrett with us, and again, he is with Disruptive Truth. Go to disruptivetruth.com, and if you didn't have a chance to make a comment or ask a question, you'll take some emails, won't you?
Absolutely.
And your endorsements, your bios there, all the books and other resources, and if people want to schedule you to speak, you know you're going to be speaking at Yale University, you're going to be speaking in Wisconsin, up in Chicago, so I wish you well in your speaking tour.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Kerby. It's an honor to be on your show.
Well, just before we run out of time, this is the last day, September 30th, and at midnight tonight, time has run out. So if you would like to be one of those last people to make a donation and hopefully put us over the top, we would greatly appreciate it. We have the matching fund. The deadline is today, and I don't know what else to say other than this is a great opportunity for you to have a donation that you make to Point of View doubled. Your gift of $100 becomes $200. If you could come up with a way of giving $500, it becomes $1,000. And so please consider what you might do between now and midnight. And I appreciate those of you that have already given. We'll certainly say thank you to you, but also want to give some of the rest of you a chance to join with the conversation and to join with us as well. We, of course, will be back here tomorrow. We have a lot more to talk about. Oh, do we ever? But at the same time, did want to mention one last time the matching fund. And if you have access to a computer, that's pointofview.net. If you don't, the order line number, 1-800-347-5151. I want to thank Andrew, Catherine, and Chris for their help behind the scenes. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
It is amazing what you can do with a pen and a phone. Really, just a pen and a phone. And no, I'm not talking about what a president can do. I'm talking about what you can do. With a pen and a phone, you can help change a life and change the world. And today, that's what I am urging you to do. Our matching challenge ends today. It's over, done at midnight. We were offered $50,000 if we could get listeners like you to step up and match that donation. Your gift will have double impact, but only if you act right now, today. Use your phone. Call 1-800-347-5151 or your smartphone. Give online, pointofview.net. Or your pen. Write a check. Send it to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Today is the day. We need your support. 800-347-5151. Pointofview.net and Point of View, Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do.
We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.